As I was narrating the 2013 final Game 1, I realized there were a few regions that I was having some trouble pronouncing. So even though I do have some linguistics background, I thought it would be cool to go over the map and look at each region individually and just teach you how to pronounce each name, and also for myself to practice how the names would have actually been pronounced by Tolkien. There are a few YouTube videos of him reciting poetry in Elvish, and specifically the place names in Middle-earth were primarily written in Sindarin, would be the language. And so I thought I could give you a few little notes on pronunciation. I'm no expert, and I'm sure many people have looked into this more than I have, but it looks like Sindarin was a language largely based on Welsh, while the other Elvish language, Noldorin, would have been based mostly on Finnish. And you can actually hear that when Tolkien recites the poetry. You can definitely hear that it sounds a bit more like Finnish. And I wasn't able to find any Sindarin audio. Anyways, I thought that we could start here in the northwestern corner. And just a little note on some pronunciation. All the vowels are pronounced the same. Just like Spanish, the vowels are very consistent, which is nice. In English, it's definitely harder to pronounce them. And otherwise, most of the vowels are the same, but the consonants are a little bit different. Very similar to English, but there are a few differences, specifically the rolled R. So let's start. So this northwestern region would be called Eriador. And note that I may get the stress wrong a little bit, so you might also say that this is Eriador, but I think it is Eriador. So let's start with, this would be Farlindon. And that one means Northland of Music, whereas Harlindon means Southland of Music. And then the Grey Havens actually would have been originally called Mithlond. All right, moving on up here, Ered So I guess we can look at this one, Ered. So when you have two vowels, it actually forms one syllable. It's called a diphthong. And let's keep going here. Note actually, Evendim is not Elvish. This one would have been in Hobbitish, so I don't actually know how you would pronounce it. But in Sindarin, it would be Uyal, which means twilight. Arnor, which used to be actually the whole kingdom, this one means royal land. Skipping down here to the Tower Hills, this would be Emun Beraid, which also just means Tower Hills. The Shire, there was no specific Sindarin word, but Shire does mean Tran. That's how you would pronounce that. And next, let's go here. This one's a tricky one. Minhiriath. So the stress often lands on the third last syllable, but sometimes the second last. That's typically what happens in Sindarin. So Minhiriath, which means between the rivers. So we've got, I believe this is the Brandywine maybe, and then this one is the Bruinen, I think. This one is Cardolan, which means Red Hill Land. South Downs, obviously that's just English. Let's see if there are any others. I think I covered everything in this region here. And again, it's Eriador, which means the lonely land. Moving on to the north, this would be Angmar, which means Iron Land or Iron Home. Now, just as a contrast, if we read Fangorn, you notice the pronunciation is a little different. So Angmar is just like in English an ing, like running, whereas here you pronounce the G, Fangorn. So there's a little bit of a difference depending on the letters surrounding. I believe if it's followed by a vowel, then it's a hard G. This one's interesting. Mount Graham is actually not elvish. It's a Mannish word, and we don't really know how to pronounce it. It could come from the Old English Grim. And another really interesting one is Mount Gundaba. This is actually the Dwarvish language, which would be Kuzdul. And this was largely based on Semitic languages like Hebrew or Arabic, these types of languages. And this is the only location on the map, as far as I'm aware, that is actually from the Dwarven language. And this one means tunnel birth or awakening, because this was where the dwarves first awakened when Aule created them here. Okay, now Rivendell, very famous. Written as a whole name, it would mean Deep Valley of the Ravine, or Deep Dale of the Cleft, and the pronunciation is Imladris. And down to the fords of Bruinen, which means the loud water. Hallin is actually not Sindarin, could be just an English word, but it would have been Eregion, which means the region of Holly, or Holly region. Moria is actually pronounced Moria, which means black chasm, abyss, or void. The high pass was called by the elves Andrath, which means the long climb, and Goblin's Gate was Energion, which is actually a Noldorian word. There was no Sindarin word that I could find. And down here, Old Ford, obviously just English. Eagles Eyrie, English. Gladden Fields was also English, but the elves called it, this one's a tricky one, Loeg Ningloron, which means the pools of golden water flowers. Very cute. Dimrildale is also English. Another hard pronunciation is Nanduhirion, which is the valley of dim streams. And down here we have Parth Celebrant, which is the field of silver lode. I just realized I missed Lorien, so I will maybe write in the comments what that means, but you pronounce it Lorien. And let's move east now. We have Carrick, which is just an English word, but in Noldorin they called it Tol Ondren. Down here where Radagast lives is called Hroskobel. So an interesting name, they kind of whisper the R, Hroskobel, which means russet or brown village. Mirkwood was called Taur en Daedelos, another tricky name, which meant the forest of the great fear. Erebor, very similar, would be Erebor, which means the lonely mountain, of course. Dale was obviously just an English name. And then Vale of the Carnen, which is red water. Vale of the Kelduin, which is river running. Also note that C is always pronounced as a hard C, K. Hrovanion means wilderland. Then we have we'll kind of just zigzag here. North Anduin Vale. So Anduin is the long river, and the infamous Dol Guldur is the hill of sorcery or the hill of dark magic. Moving over here, North Dorwinion would be Young Land Country. All right, moving down to the Brown Lands. They were called Berennun in Sindarin. Berennun. Kind of had a little bit of actually the French U sound as well. So they may have that in Welsh. I'm more familiar with French, but. And then this also has a French sound. Emun Muil means the dreary hills. And Dagorlad, the battle plain. And then the Ash Mountains, which were called Eredlithwi. Now down to the home of Sauron. We have Barad-dûr. So notice, I'll just move these guys out of the way here. Whenever you have a little accent, or I like to call it the chapeau, over a letter, you pronounce that much, much longer. I'll just move these back. So Barad-dûr would be the pronunciation here. And then to the south, Gorgoroth, the Valley of Terror or Deadly Fear. Then Maranon, the Black Gate. Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery. And this one is by the Sea of Nurnen. In it, so Nurn, I believe, means sad water. That one's not totally certain. Okay, now the South Bronx and Easterlings. We've got, sorry, I'll just zoom over here. East Hrun. And again, we've got the accent, so it would actually be East Hrun. Now, Khand, there is no pronunciation that we know of. Harad means south, or also left-hand direction. And Umbar means doom, fate, or curse. Okay, now we can go on to Gondor and the surrounding lands that used to be Gondor. We have Ithilien, which means moonland. Down here we have Harondor, which means South Gondor. The former capital, Osgiliath, meant the Fortress of the Stars or the Citadel of the Stars, which I think is my favorite. Just sounds really good. Citadel of the Stars. We have Minas Tirith, the Tower of Watch or the Tower of Guard. Up north, the Druadan Forest. And again, you have the accent, so you make that vowel a little longer. Druadan Forest, where the Woses live and the wild men. So Druadan, I believe, means wild man. Down here, Lasarnach means flowery, although the meaning of Arnach is not really known. Let's see the little bit of the Scottish ach sound there. Maybe they have that in Welsh too. Someone can let me know from Wales. And we have Pelargir, which means the harbor of royal ships. Lamedon, we actually have no meaning for that one. Dol Amroth would be the hill of Amroth. Erech, again, we have no meaning here. And moving westward, Anfalas, which means the long coast. And Andrast, similar meaning, means the long cape. This one's tricky. So notice we've got the accent, so we're going to make that longer. Druaith Yaur. So this is Old Pukul land. So this is actually apparently where the wild men used to live in the west of Gondor. And actually you would say it Gondor. Kind of like the A in law, Gondor. And then this is Enedwaith, which means middle folk or middle region. And then lastly, Tharbad, which means the crossing. And there used to be a bridge here. So this was a major connecting point between the two kingdoms in the Second Age. And here we have Dunland. So that would just be an English word meaning dark land. But the elves called this region Gwathúrim. Sorry, it'd be Gwathúrim. So that's a bit of a tricky one. Gwathúrim, which means the shadowy people. Arthanc means the forked height. Fords of Eisen, that one is Old English, and it was called the Fords of Angren, which means iron. So notice Angmar and Angren are related. And then Rohan has its own language, and we don't know the pronunciation as far as I know. So it would just be, sorry, I was zoomed out there. West Emnet and East Emnet as far as I know. And Fold, again, we don't really know how to pronounce it. Edoras, however, is actually a Sindarin word, which probably means the courts or dwellings. Oh, by the way, Emnet means plain, so West Plain and East Plain. Just lastly, to wrap up here, the names of the different countries. So Rohan means horse country, Gondor means stone land, Mordor means black land, and Isengard means the iron fortress, and it would have been pronounced Angrenost by the elves. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a comprehensive view of how to pronounce the different regions. And obviously you don't need to say it in the accent I was using, but sometimes it can be confusing naming the different regions that you're trying to go to, especially if you're in a face-to-face game. And luckily for us, the most complicated ones to pronounce are usually areas we don't even enter. So anyway, just wanted to make a fun little video and to help you practice the pronunciation, but also for me so that I can pronounce the place names better in the upcoming videos. All right, hope you enjoyed it.